So a little quick introduction. My name is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. Um, my English name is Adam. My Hebrew name is Eliyahu. Wow, loving this. Delaware, Ohio. Let me turn my phone on silent. Um, my English name is Adam. My Hebrew name, given name, is Eliyahu. Um, I live in Israel in the Golan Heights, where all the fun is. I was born and raised in America. I moved here when I was 30 years old in 1991. You can do the math. And I was not religious in America. I became religious in Israel. I served in the IDF as a combat medic. I lived on Kibbutz Eliyahu for 5 years, where I was a dairy farmer, raised the baby cows. And I've been the feature articles writer for Israel 365 News, formerly Breaking Israel News, since I guess for 9 years, almost 10 years. Arizona, Diane, great. Um, and my job I was tasked with writing stories about the news and prophecy, news from a prophetic angle, writing about prophecy, writing about Geulah, which literally means redemption, as it's unfolding in Israel today. I was a fairly mainstream Orthodox Jew who has very unusual taste in head coverings, but I was tasked with writing for Christians who I knew absolutely nothing about. And in the past 9 years, I've really managed to. One of the great things about this job is I've met some really wonderful. I mean, I had a couple of people come visit me today from Mizgav Am. They're Christians who are setting up a prayer location on the border with Lebanon. And they really love Israel. And they came to visit me. And my wife was blown away. She's like, these people are so nice. All the people I've met through my job are incredibly nice. Anyone who loves Israel generally is a nice person, has their heart in the right place. And those are the kind of people I've been writing for, writing with, reporting on. So that's what I've been doing for 9 years. Yeah, Angelo. Okay. And that's what I've been doing for 9 years. And one of the stories that I've been covering is the red heifer. And first, I'll tell you how I covered it. And the reason why I'm doing this webinar is my book that I wrote about the red heifers just got published, and it's available. I didn't even get a copy of it yet. It's that new. It's online. I should be getting a copy of it this week, so I can't even show you a copy. I'll put the link in the chat in a little bit, and you can see it for yourself. 9 years ago, the Temple Institute was running the red heifer program, trying to find or develop the red heifer, and unsuccessfully. But red heifer is basically an entirely red cow. We'll get into what that exactly means, but it's actually not so common. But I would write a story occasionally, a farmer in Virginia, a farmer in Mexico, ranchers here and there would be like, I think I got one. And none of them panned out because it cannot have two non-red hairs. It can have one non-red hair, but not two. And that disqualifies it. Also, it cannot have a blemish. And putting in ear tags is a blemish. The red heifer, we'll go into the biblical sources of it. But before we do, I want to point out that Maimonides, the Ramban, said that the red heifer is the most enigmatic and ununderstandable mitzvah in the entire Torah. So what that means is anyone who says, I understand it, either they're a scholar of massive proportions or they don't understand what they're talking about. Okay, for some reason this is doing weird things. Hopefully this will work. I'm going to keep going as if it's working. Okay, so the biblical sources, of course, it's in Numbers 19:2. It says, this is the ritual law that the Lord has commanded. Instruct the children of Israel to bring you a perfectly red cow without blemish, in which there's no defect and on which no yoke has been laid. So just from that biblical verse, that one biblical verse, we see there are three requirements. The first requirement being it's perfectly red, it does not have a blemish, meaning there's no defect, and no yoke has been laid on it. Just checking, can you all still hear me? Because and see me, because the great. Okay, thank you, Sylvia. Okay, so as we said, there are four requirements. Perfectly red. Well, actually, that's already two requirements. It's got to be perfectly, and it's got to be red. It's also got to be a cow. Can't have a blemish. There's no defect and no yoke. Okay, so what do all those mean? That's one verse, but there's a lot of meaning in that short verse. So red, first of all, the rabbis teach us, what is a red cow? It's obviously something in nature. So we're not talking bright red that's unnatural. We're talking about a normal red, which is probably, if you saw it, you would think brown. It's a bright brown, though. Also, when we say a cow, the Hebrew word there is para. Para is cow. There is a word for calf, which is eglah. So since we say para in the Torah, we understand that it's a fully grown calf. Okay, let me see if I can get you. Okay. So I'm inviting Josh Wander on stage. He's here. God bless you, Josh. You're amazing. So from that one verse, we see that it's also got to be a cow. A cow is 2 years old. 2 years 1 day, 2 years 1 month, but it's got to be 2 years old, fully grown. Now, the issue of the two hairs is our understanding of the word perfectly, which in Hebrew is tamimah, perfect, meaning it is perfectly red, meaning the redness of it is all encompassing. And that's where we get no more than one red hair. Okay? Yeah. And no yoke and no blemish. That's also an important thing. A blemish is any kind of scar or wound. So, for example, the problem we have today is when calves are born, the modern dairies, the modern ranchers, they have to put ear numbers in them, and that ear number is a blemish. It makes a hole in the ear, so that's a blemish, and that renders it unsuited for the ceremony. Okay, and no yoke has been laid on it. And we're going to be extreme in that, meaning you'd never used it for work and it never carried anything. That means, of course, if it's a female, it cannot be pregnant because a bull was on top of it. You cannot even lean on it, or even pet it. They've never carried any weight whatsoever. So that's where we get those requirements from the one biblical verse. Okay. And while we said it's a para, a cow, that's the minimum age. There is no maximum age. So the cow will always remain eligible, no matter what the age. And in the days of the temple, in the days of the tabernacle, it was performed right away. So there really wasn't a question of upper limit. The cow would reach 2 years of age, and they would perform the ceremony. And not only that, they had leftover ashes from the previous cow. So everyone involved in the ceremony was ritually pure. I'm jumping ahead. The ashes are used. The cow is burned entirely outside of the temple, outside of the tabernacle, outside of the camp, and the ashes are used in a purification ceremony, which we'll get to. So we said it's perfectly red, perfect meaning tmima, meaning perfect, completely. And so one red hair is permitted, two is not. And just to give you an insight into what that means practically, I've actually witnessed the rabbis checking the cow, and they take this almost fully grown cow and they take magnifying glasses, and they go over the cow from the tip of its tail to the tip of its nose and to its hooves and to its back, and they check every single hair meticulously. Which, if you know cows, yeah, Josh is off screen, and they check the cow every single hair. Cows generally don't like that. It's a crazy process to watch. So okay, so throughout history, we have in tradition that's from Moses until slightly after the destruction of the temple. Only 9 red heifers were found, because what you do with the red heifers, you burn it. We'll get into that. You take a tiny speck of ash, you drop it into a huge vat of spring water. You take hyssop, a branch of hyssop, you dip it in it, and you fling it and you fling it towards a group of people who need to be purified. And if a drop of water lands anywhere on their body, they're purified. So one complete cow burned on a huge pyre of wood generates a huge amount of ash and can purify literally millions of people. We did a dry run and experiment, and that's I'll describe what that actually means. So you can see that the requirements are very, very exacting. The animal itself is very, very rare. As I said, the Temple Institute has been seeking a red heifer for more than 12, 15 years and have yet to find one. So that's how rare it is. Okay, so the red heifer is used in the process of purification. Um, it's actually I really enjoyed learning about the laws of purification, because it's something we don't even do today. We have nothing like it. We don't have the concept of holiness. What is holy? Something that in itself is holy, something that in itself has inherent holiness, something that can become ritually impure. We don't have that today, and it was something that in biblical times and in the Bible is absolutely explicit. It's a reality they lived in. There are different levels of purity and different types of impurity, different ways of passing impurity, different ways of removing those specific impurities. The red heifer, in particular, will be used to remove the impurity that's imparted from proximity to a dead body. What do I mean proximity? A dead body, parts of a dead body, pieces of a dead body. It is the archetypal impurity. It imparts impurity of deadness. And it spreads. If you see the dead body, it emanates impurity, and it's only stopped by some form of barrier. So if there's a tent and there's a dead body inside of it, if you're outside the tent, you do not become impure. But if there's a door, the impurity goes out and you become impure. If it sounds inexplicable to you, I think it's because we don't live in this reality, but it is a biblical reality. Most people are familiar with the concept of leprosy. Leprosy was a form of impurity, and people who came in contact with a leper became impure. But the red heifer was used to protect against ritual impurity, which was very, very difficult to release. And the only way you could do it was through the ritual of the red heifer, the ash in the water, the hyssop branch being sprinkled with it. And you may think, well, I've never come in contact with a dead body. You would be surprised. A lot of planes have in them, a lot of planes carry dead bodies, and those dead bodies impart ritual impurity to whoever's on the plane. So Kohanim, Jews who are from the priestly lineage, they are not allowed to fly on a plane that's carrying a dead body. They have to ask in advance. Hospitals, if there's a dead body in the hospital, you can become ritually impure from that. So a little baby being born in a hospital can immediately become ritually impure. Kohanim don't go into hospitals unless they have, actually in Israel, they have special sections of the hospital. They don't go into cemeteries. These are places where you contract ritual impurity, and the red heifer can release that, can cleanse you from it. And the reason why we said in the beginning that the red heifer is the most inexplicable mitzvah, one of the reasons why it's so inexplicable is that the ashes of the red heifer are used to purify people from contact with a dead body. However, the Kohen who prepares the ashes, he himself becomes ritually impure, which doesn't make any sense. So what happened? So 7 days before the ceremony, a Kohen would completely separate himself from his family, and especially his wife. And during that week, he lived in a unique chamber in the northeast corner of the temple complex. And he would stay there because he didn't want to come into contact with anything that would make him ritually impure. Everything all the utensils he used were made out of stone, or he did not use any wood or metal, because wood or metal can become ritually impure. Stone cannot. He underwent daily sprinklings with the water of the previous red heifer, and he would and when the day arrived, the elders of the Sanhedrin and other priests would walk ahead of the priest who was going to do the ceremony of the red heifer, and he would go to the Mount of Olives. In the days of the tabernacle, it was outside of the camp. In the days of the temple, the red heifer ceremony was performed on the Mount of Olives from a location that faced the temple, and that if the doors of the temple were open, you could see into the Holy of Holies. So on one hand, it was separated from the temple. On the other hand, it was inherently connected to the depths of the temple. He would go into a mikveh, a ritual bath, and it was a very special, of the highest standards. And they would transport the red heifer to the site on the Mount of Olives, and they didn't want it to contract impurity along the way. So for the purposes of the ceremony, they built a causeway, a bridge, a low bridge that led to the site. And they would construct a pile of wood on the Mount of Olives. They would specifically use cedar, pine, cypress, or fig, because they have certain spiritual qualities. And there was a way that in the Talmud they describe how they created this tower of wood, and then they would they would slaughter the cow. They put it on the top of the wood. Its head would be to the south, facing west towards the temple. They would bind it with reed grass. And then the priest would ascend the structure, position himself to the east, facing west toward the temple. I'm sorry, they would first bind the heifer, and on top of the pyre of wood, he would perform the slaughtering. He would do the kosher slaughtering. He would gather the blood at his left hand while balancing on top of this wood, and he would sprinkle the blood 7 times with his right index finger. He would ignite the wood from the western side, and he would add hyssop, and he would also add scarlet dyed wool. The wool is referred to in Hebrew in the Torah as tola'at shani. There's a special way to make it. It's outlined in the book. It's very detailed. It comes from a tiny, tiny little bug that's found on specific trees at a specific time of the year. So it's very rare. It's not really crimson. It's more orange saffron colored. So after all of the wood was burned and all of the cow was burned, they gathered up all the ashes, every single bit of it, and they would grind it up if there were any big pieces. And one portion was kept in the temple. The second portion was kept at the site where they burned it on the Mountain of Olives. And the third was kept in the temple as a remembrance, and it was never used. So this is how they actually burned the cow, which it sounds very specific, precise, and involved, and it was. Okay. Yeah, the prior ashes are required. I think they were just living in a different reality where they would always be looking for the next red heifer, and they had the ashes, and they would keep it in certain places all over the country so that people who became impure, like in the north of the country, would be able to be purified. So that's definitely part of it. Okay, so far so good. So how did the people get purified? Okay, purification ritual. So what they would do is they would take the ashes. You can read in the book of Numbers, chapters 19, also how you contract and purify spiritual impurities with the red heifer. So you can read what I'm about to explain in chapter 19 of Numbers. Okay. So it actually takes 7 days to become pure from the ritual impurity of proximity to a dead body. What you do is on the 3rd and 7th days, the impure person must be sprinkled with with the waters of the red heifer, meaning special spring waters that have had a tiny dot of the ashes put in, and the hyssop is used to sprinkle them. That has to happen twice, on the 3rd and 7th days. And yeah, and the other days he goes into the mikveh, into the ritual bath. And yeah, and the actual sprinkling, really, you take the tiniest particle of the ashes, 3 stalks of hyssop bound together, and that's how you sprinkled. I also want to point out that it was considered that if you went outside of Israel, you also contracted this impurity, because of the laws of impurity, of proximity to a dead body, the grave sites and in the cemeteries were very precisely marked and known, and outside of Israel, much less so. So as a result, if you went outside of Israel, you were considered as if you most probably contracted this. So just to put this into context, I said the tiniest speck, and you say one cow. Okay, so there was actually a test run. There was a professor, Zohar Amar, who specializes in this. And in 2019, he did a dry run where he took a 2-year-old cow that was not a red heifer, and he sacrificed it precisely according to the ritual of the red heifer. He did not do it on the Mount of Olives, but it was a full-grown cow with the specified amount of wood in the specified way. So he did this, and he found the specific way that the wood could be arranged so that there would be optimal air circulation, so that the wood would burn at a very high temperature and be completely burned. And they had a foundation of pine needles and small twigs, which was also allowed. And the thing that's amazing is he used the Baladi breed, the breed of cow Baladi, which is very common in ancient Israel. It wasn't red, but the size was what a 2-year-old cow would have. They had 12 men following the ancient tradition. The cow weighed 270 kilograms. They put it on the wood, and they burned it. And it took and they added cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet dyed wool. They said it reached 940 degrees Celsius, which is very hot. And it's the temperature that a modern crematorium operates at. So it was very, very hot, and it burned for 9 hours. Okay, and at 9 hours it stopped burning, but it was still hot. And so it took several hours to cool. They used 1.4 tons of wood in the burning, and it produced 66 kilograms of ash. And they figured that 11 kilograms came from the animal itself and not from the wood. So it was 11 kilograms from the animal, and the remainder 55 kilograms from the permitted amount of wood. So he wanted to figure out how many people could that purify. So the traditional sources that we have say only the tiniest amount of ash was needed. So he said 0.2 to 0.3 grams of ash were sufficient for 250 liters of water, and one sprinkling used just 1/10 of 1 millimeter. This is all in the book. So if you get the book, you can get all these figures. So that meant that if you use 0.2 to 0.3 grams of ash in 250 liters of water, and one sprinkling use just 1/10 of 1 millimeter, the ashes from one single burning could theoretically provide 660 billion, with a B, purification ceremonies. They could add another ton of wood if they wanted to, and that would add another 250 billion sprinklings. That would be permissible to add that other ton of wood. So if you think about it, one red heifer could purify 900 billion people, which explains why there were only 9 red heifers from the time of Moses. No, the red heifer does not become unclean, because if you remember, so that could certainly purify the entire generation. I'm going to get to the Diana. Certainly, absolutely get to the 5 red heifers, but I wanted to go through the theory first. The prior ashes they had them. Problem is we don't. So we do. I'm trying to answer questions on the screen. So it made it a lot easier. So we're going to have to figure out how to make a new red heifer without the prior ashes. Wooden binding, inspection, shipping. touching the red heifer and thus make it unclean. It would be clean. The problem is you would have to do it in a way that did not make a burden on the cow. And that would be tricky. But that's a very good question. Is there any connection to it being a female cow, specifically to it being through Chava that the earth became ritually impure? I don't know of any source that says that. That would be interesting because through Chava, the death did come into the world. So I could definitely be willing to talk about that. But it is a female cow just because the Torah says para is a cow. How about the ashes found in... Ooh, Nat, you're an insider. Let me write that question down. Okay. These are so many good questions. We got to do this again sometime. These questions are absolutely amazing. So what are the implications of the red heifer? We know from the Rambam and from Midrash, from the Jewish tradition, and this is not in the Torah specifically, that there were 9 red heifers from the time of Moses until the time of the destruction of the temple. And since there were leftover ashes, it was still done after the destruction of the temple. And every red heifer in history, they say when they came at watershed moments in Jewish history. Of course, the first one was with Moses. That's when they completed the Mishkan, the tabernacle. That was pretty transformative. The second one came when Ezra led the Jews back from Babylonian exile in 457 BCE, and that was the second red heifer. And so red heifer after red heifer came during these very special times. The fourth red heifer came during the time of Yochanan, the high priest, who later became a Tzadduki, a Sadducee. The fifth red heifer coincided with the rise of the Pharisaic movement. The sixth emerged during the time of the great debates between the houses of Hillel and Shammai. The seventh and eighth appeared in the times of relative peace, allowing for the continued operation of the temple service. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi records that the ninth red heifer was prepared by the high priest Ishmael ben Pavi around 60 CE, and it was used to maintain ritual purity for 3 centuries after the temple's destruction. So there are sources that suggest that there are hidden caches of ashes that were hidden away for later use, though we haven't found them. During the 16th century, Jews throughout the Ottoman Empire tried to find a red heifer and were unsuccessful. When Jews came back to Israel, even the secular Zionists tried to find red heifers on the agricultural settlements in modern Israel, and they were unsuccessful. The Temple Institute, as I said, has been looking for a very long time to find the red heifers and have been unsuccessful. Yeah. The person in charge of it is Rav Azaria Ariel. So I want to take a little bit of what happened was, and I'm going to get into this, is about 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, Boneh Israel, it's an organization of Jews and Christians working together to find a red heifer. And they were going all over Texas and they were advertising. And a truly miraculous story. There was a rancher who was retired, devout Christian. I spoke to him. I learned more about the New Testament in my 20-minute conversation with him than I ever knew before. And very devout Christian. And when he was retired or semi-retired, he decided he wanted to raise red cows because he was a believer in the Bible. Well, when COVID hit, he had 5 little red cows born. And he saw the advertisement in the cattle magazines by Boneh Israel that they were looking for a red heifer. And he said, I think I have him. And they showed up, and the little red calves did not have the necessary legally required earrings, ear numbers. Why? Because they were born during COVID. And the person responsible for putting the numbers in the new baby cows was quarantined and didn't make it into work. So those 5 cows remained kosher. It was in August 2022 that Byron Stinson of Boneh Israel brought them to Israel. I was actually at the airport when they came in. And it was Byron Stinson also recently published a book about his experiences bringing the red heifers, and it tells a much more detailed, practical description of how he brought them to Israel, which was kind of miraculous in itself. They flew them in over plane. Um, Pardon me, it's getting late here, and the reason why that was so difficult was, as we said, they didn't have ear tags, but you have to be able to identify them. They actually brought them over. It's against the law to bring in live animals, especially cattle. So they had to bring them over as pets. They were listed, they got a permit as pets. I mean, the government knew that they weren't pets, but they had to find some form that they could fill out. So they listed them as pets, but they didn't have numbers, and you had to be able to identify them. So the rabbis figured out a place on the cow's body where you could insert an RFID chip, which is a computer chip, that it would not leave a mark. They're very tiny chips. They're little tiny, shaped like a pill. So they got these, and you have to pass over a sensor over it. And it was small enough that it was not considered a burden to the animal. Okay. So the cows came over in August 2022 or in September 2022. And they had been checked in Texas and brought over. And yeah. And this was after years of the Temple Institute not finding red heifers. So the fact that Christians stepped in and were successful, that's a really miraculous thing. And it's amazing. It's really, so when the temple comes, the Christians are going to have a very essential role in that. And they came over, they were exactly a year old. If they had been younger, and they had to be brought over in a padded wood crate, a large crate, so that because if they banged up against the side of the crate, it would wound them. And it was decided not to ship them over in a boat because that's actually more abusive, more traumatic to the animals. Yeah, and airlines only okay. And it was very hot, and there was a very small window of opportunity for flying them over, that it wouldn't be too hot. Um, and they didn't know until the last moment whether they were going to come. Okay, so let me see. Also, they had to have a kosher Kohen, and the Temple Institute has found a young man, because it can't be a kid, a small child, because slaughtering a cow is actually physically demanding and psychologically demanding. So you need a young man, and he has to have been born at home and never been in a hospital, never been in a cemetery. And they actually found several candidates, and they've been educating them in how to perform the ceremony. Let me take a look if there have been any questions. It could be the third and seventh days of cleansing. I'm not really sure why, but except for the fact that that's what's written. The shipping was done without touching the red heifers. I was a dairy farmer for 5 years. I worked with the baby cows on kibbutz Eliyahu for 5 years. I know young cows, and I've visited the cows several times. I was there when they came off the plane. I've never seen cows act like this before. They were so gentle, so curious, so unafraid. They've never been touched. They've never been bossed around. They've never been abused. They've never been even had anyone like hit them to go in a certain direction. They were the most beautiful, sweet animals, and still are. They're being kept in Shiloh. Um, yeah. What were the other questions? Okay. Does the temple have to be built before the red heifer is slain? Well, there are a couple questions implicit in that. When I said that the 10th red heifer is for the Mashiach, there's actually two opinions. One is that the final red heifer will be the ceremony will be done by Mashiach, by the Messiah, and the other opinion is that the final red heifer will purify Israel to greet the Messiah. Just as when it comes to the temple, there's two opinions about whether the Mashiach will come to build the temple, or whether, I mean, there's a verse, and I can't find it at this very moment, that the Mashiach will go into the temple, meaning that the temple will be built before the Mashiach and in preparation for him. So it's not really clear the timeline that's going to happen, but these are all events that are dependent on each other. The red heifer, the temple, the Mashiach, these are all dependent on each other. Um, I don't know the prophetic significance to numbers 3 and 7. Well, the number 7 I actually do. I apologize. The number 7 in Torah symbolizes a complete cycle. There were 7 days of creation, the 6 days of actual creation, and the seventh day of the Sabbath. So there's 7 days of creation. It represents a complete cycle. So anytime you see the number 7, you can think a complete cycle. The sabbatical is 7 years. So it represents a complete cycle. I do not know what the number 3 represents. So the number 7, and a kind of rebirth. The Sabbath is a rebirth. So these 7 days of purification are a complete cycle of purification. Who asked about the ashes in Qumran? Who is that? Nat, you asked, how do you know about that? That's supposed to be a secret. No, I'm kidding. Qumran, that's another interesting story. Oh, there's going to be, okay. I want to also talk about the role of Christians in these things, or non-Jews. There was in the 60s an amazing Christian pastor who came to Israel by the name of Vendell Jones. I actually met him once. I got a ride with him very briefly, and I knew who he was. I said, "Are you Vendell Jones?" And he's like, "Yes, I am." He wasn't famous, but I knew who he was. Vendell Jones came as a devout Christian to Israel. Really interesting dude. He started the Noahide movement. He oh God bless this guy. He was colorblind, and that gave him a unique ability to act as a lookout for the IDF in the 67 war, because colorblind people, they see camouflage as a different color than the surrounding. So for them, camouflage stands out. So Vendel was able to pick out the camouflage in the Jordanian border. So it's just another story of how special he was. Vendel had a bunch of kids, and one of his sons needed a kidney transplant, and Vendel was compatible. So he went into the hospital to donate a kidney to his son, and when they opened them up, he had 3 kidneys. So God loved Vendel. Vendel started digging in Qumran after 67. Before 67, Qumran is on the Dead Sea. It was part of Jordan. It's where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. There's an amazing dig there. If you ever get a chance to connect with Jim Barfield and the Copper Scroll Project, that's down in Qumran. I went there with Jim. There was a lot happening in Qumran in the days of the Second Temple. And Vendel Jones found a small jar of oil that he identified as the persimmon oil. which was used to anoint kings and messiahs. And the Israel Antiquities Authority verified that it was indeed persimmon oil, and that created a big uproar because in the Israeli archaeology community, there's a big dispute. There's a large percentage of Israeli archaeologists who do not believe that any part of the Bible is accurate. They think that King David was a made-up myth. They think that if there's any artifacts that talk about things that were written in the Bible, that they're fake and that it's folklore and it's not real. So when they saw the persimmon oil, they had to say it was real, but then they're like, no. Yeah. So Vendel Jones kept digging, and he found a huge tons of aromatic ash. Pardon me. And when it was chemically analyzed, it was made of 11 ingredients. And that was clearly the temple incense. There was a huge storehouse of temple incense in Qumran, but the Israel Antiquities Authority refused to verify it, because if we had temple incense and we had the persimmon oil, people would start getting pushy and say, hey, let's do something with it. And the Israeli government didn't want that to happen. So that was the ash he found. But if you ask me and other people who are familiar with Qumran and what's going on there, Qumran was kind of like, there were a lot of scribes there. They were Essenes. They were a very unusual sect. They were kind of like connected to the temple, but like matter and antimatter, which is why the incense was there, why the persimmon oil was there, why the Dead Sea Scrolls were there, why the Copper Scroll was there. So I would be surprised if they did not find one of those little caches of red heifer ash. I'm pretty sure it would be there. Okay. So far, so good. So I think I answered all the questions that I saw. If I didn't answer a question, or if you want another question, please type it in the comments. Yeah. So about the red heifer being found by non-Jews. So there's an interesting story in the there's a dispute, as there always is in the Mishnah, about whether or not a red heifer can be purchased from Gentiles. And there's a dispute. There's two different opinions. And Rambam, Maimonides, says that, yes, you can. But the most compelling precedent for this is a story that's told in the Talmud. There was a man named Dama ben Netina, and he was a Gentile merchant from Ashkelon during the Second Temple period, 1st century CE. And this story is told in both the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds. It's so apparently it was very well known. And in the Talmudic account, the sages wanted to buy a stone from Dama ben Netina, a stone because one of the stones had fallen out and broken from the what do you call it? The breastplate that the high priest wears. And they offered him 100 dinars, which was a huge sum of money. But the problem was, Dama ben Netina realized that the stone was in a lockbox, and the key to the lockbox was under a pillow that his father Oh, Jill. Important question. I'll get to that in a minute after I finish this. Please don't let me log off without answering about the status of the cows. So Dama ben Natina, he said, hey, my father's asleep, and the key is under his pillow. And I have such love and respect for my father that even for this huge sum of money, I will not wake him up. So he just looked at the sages and he said, no. And they were like, oh, he surely. No, the 11 ingredients in the anointing oil is not in my book. Sorry. He said, so they said, surely he's just trying to bargain for more money. So they offered him twice that. And he said, no. They offered him 3 times that. He said, no. And they kept upping the offer, and he said, no, no, no. So they went away, and they were very upset. They didn't know where they would get the stone. Well, they went up to 1,000 dinars, which is a huge sum of money. So what happened was that he went up to them afterwards, and he said, here, I'll sell it to you for 100 dinars. So he lost 900 dinars on that. But he did do the amazing thing of providing a stone for the breastplate for the temple, for the high priest. What happened was in Shemaim, in heaven, they were so, his act of loving his father so much that night a perfect red heifer was born in his herd, and he also sold that to Israel for a huge sum of money, and it made up for all the money he lost by not selling the gem to the sages at that time. So we have in the Talmud talking about a red heifer being provided by a non-Jew. Okay, I have gone on way too much and bored you people. So top of the chat. Okay. I'll put, before I sign off, I'll put in my email address so you can contact me. I'll also put in all the information. So when I finish this story, please hold on, and I'll provide you with, God willing, all the information you need. Okay. So the 5 red heifers were moved around a bit. They were kind of hidden because we didn't want anyone messing with them. But they are now in Shiloh. And I have to be very, very careful in how I say this. Oh, wow, Esther, that's so sweet. Thank you very much. That's so kind of you to say it's a good teaching. I'm glad you got something from it. So they're in Shiloh, and they're obviously 2.5 years old, well over the age to be used for the ceremony, and the ceremony has not been done. And the reason why, and I have to be very precise, I spoke to Rav Ariel, I think 2 weeks ago, and he was very careful to say, it cannot be said that at this moment we have a red heifer that is kosher to be used in the ceremony. That is not to say that all of the cows are unsuited. It is to say that on informal inspections, they have seen non-red hairs. Yeah, Esther, the video will go up. It's been recorded on the cloud, and hopefully someone at Israel 365 will turn it into a real video, and we'll do this. So that's not to say that they've been verified. The cow has to be verified. The non-red hairs could fall out, and they'll be kosher. And they have to, and they're kosher until they're verified as not kosher, and that has not been done. So though it cannot be said that they are not kosher for the ceremony, it can be said that as of now, it cannot be said that we have a kosher cow for the ceremony. Now, this is very important, and I'll tell you why. Another thing that I forgot to say was last year at this time, Hamas came out and said that one of the reasons they attacked Israel on October 7th was because of the red heifers. They said because of the red heifers, the Jews will be going up to the Temple Mount and creating the temple and kicking off the Muslims. and therefore they had to attack as soon as they knew that the red heifers were here. And in the words of Rav Ariel, they don't need an excuse. They just want to kill Jews no matter what. But this time of year, the week before Passover, every year, the Jews read the Torah portion having to do with the red heifers. And the Torah portion of the red heifers, it's out of place. We have an order in which we read, and this is out of order, but we read it specifically before Passover, so that if we go to bring the Passover offering, we will have gone over the laws of purity, so that we will be bringing the Passover offering in purity, in a state of purity. So this time of year, um, they heard, oh, the Jews are going to be reading the Torah portion of the red heifer. So they're going to do the ceremony on that Sabbath, which you can't do the red heifer on Sabbath. And you can't even do it on Passover. And the Temple Institute, oh gosh, that reminds me, I have to, okay. The Temple Institute does a conference on the red heifer every year. And Hezbollah actually put a copy of the flyer that the Temple Institute put out in Hebrew on their Telegram page saying, oh, the Jews are going to do the red heifer and we have to stop them and kill them before they do. And CBS News put out a documentary saying the Jews are inciting the Arabs by planning on doing the red heifer. And they showed this big white altar, which is actually a fake altar made out of cloth that's in Mitzpah, Yericho, I believe, overlooking the Dead Sea, which is not the Mount of Olives, and the red heifer isn't done on a altar. Everything about the article was wrong. But there was just a chance for them to blame the Jews for the war. So Nat said, I think the comments about maybe not having qualifying red heifer is a deflecting tactic, so the focus is not on the red heifers anymore. I don't believe so. If you're familiar with the expression cafeteria religion, where people can pick and choose what they do in religion, Judaism is the antithesis of cafeteria religion. We're not allowed to ask questions. We're not allowed to say which mitzvah is more important than the other mitzvah. If we can do a mitzvah, we have to do it. And we have to do it in its right time, in its right way. Like I said, 9 red heifers in all of history since Mount Sinai. It's pretty rare. And if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it absolutely perfect. So we need a perfect red heifer. And I'm relatively close with Rav Ariel. I don't think it's a deflecting tactic. I think that if there was a kosher red heifer, they would have done the ceremony. Absolutely done the ceremony. Absolutely not. All in God's perfect timing. We do our part, God does his part. It's like Abraham standing there saying, bring me the ram. And the ram comes. So that's where things are holding right now. You reminded me that I hope I don't miss it. There's a Red Heifer conference coming up. So if there are any questions, let me put in the information. Okay, the book can be purchased on Amazon. Here's the Amazon link. Here is the link in the Israel 365 store. Where can you get it in Israel? You order it online. As I said, I haven't even gotten a copy yet. You should order it in Israel. You should order it from the Israel 365 store because they're shipping it out from Israel. So that's where you'll get it. Okay. So if you contact my email, that email, I'll give you how you can connect with me through my Substack, how you can see my videos, how you can read my articles about this. I'd love to be in touch. And also it's amazing that just a few weeks ago, I was able to get back on Facebook. I was on Facebook for 15 years, had 5,000 friends, and Facebook did what Facebook does. So I was booted off Facebook in a very hardcore way, and it took me a very long time to get back on, but now I'm on. Yeah, so if you go to that video, at the bottom of the video, you'll see the links to my other books, the links to my Substack, to my PayPal. Okay, folks, I guess I'm breaking up, and this is my sign to say goodbye. Uh, thank you all. Be blessed, y'all. And hopefully next time we talk, it'll be about how the red heifers got used and how we are ready for uh, we are ready for the third temple.